May 27th, 1968, Memorial Day. Norfolk Naval Base, Virginia. Families lined the pier, holding flowers and homemade signs. Children in their Sunday best, clutching their fathers' photographs. Wives, some pregnant, scanning the horizon for a familiar silhouette breaking through the morning mist. USS Scorpion was supposed to be home. She wasn't. The command center tried to maintain calm. Delayed, they said. Communications issue. Standard protocol. Nothing to worry about. But in the secure rooms deep inside Submarine Force Atlantic headquarters, something else was happening. Captains who never visited the radio room were suddenly there. Admirals pacing. The kind of panic that doesn't get recorded in official logs, because they already knew. The USS Scorpion, a 252-foot nuclear-powered attack submarine carrying 99 souls, had vanished somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, and for 72 critical hours, nobody said a word. This is the story they tried to erase. The story of the submarine that disappeared, and what the Navy knew, but refused to tell. Let me take you back. Not to May 27th, when families were told, but to May 22nd, 5 days earlier. Deep in the Atlantic, 400 miles southwest of the Azores Islands, something catastrophic happened at approximately 1859 Greenwich Mean Time. The U.S. Navy's sound surveillance system, SOSUS, a top-secret network of underwater microphones designed to track Soviet submarines during the Cold War, picked up a series of sounds. Not the typical acoustic signatures they monitored daily. This was different. Deep. Muffled. The sound of metal screaming under impossible pressure. The sound of a hull collapsing at crushing depth. The sound of death. The hydrophones captured it all. A violent, chaotic sequence lasting just over 3 minutes. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence where there should have been the steady mechanical heartbeat of a nuclear submarine. USS Scorpion had stopped transmitting. But here's what doesn't make sense. Here's where the official story starts to crumble. The Navy knew. They knew within hours. The SOSUS network had triangulated the approximate location. The acoustic analysts knew what those sounds meant. There was no ambiguity, no room for hope. And yet, they said nothing. To understand what happened, you need to understand Scorpion herself. She was a skipjack-class nuclear attack submarine. Commissioned in 1960, she was supposed to be one of the Navy's finest. Fast, maneuverable, deadly. Equipped with 6 torpedo tubes, capable of firing both conventional and nuclear-tipped weapons. The cutting edge of Cold War technology. But by 1968, Scorpion was falling apart. Her crew had a nickname for her, Scrap Iron. She had vibration issues, oil leaks, a seawater leak from the propeller shaft seal. Her depth limit had been reduced to just 300 feet, a third of her test depth, because the Navy didn't trust her hull integrity. She needed a complete overhaul. She didn't get one. The Cold War waited for no one. In February 1968, Scorpion was deployed to the Mediterranean Sea for surveillance operations. Commander Francis Slattery, just 36 years old, led a crew of 99 men. Most of them were under 25. Young sailors with families waiting back home. The deployment was routine. Track Soviet movements, gather intelligence, stay invisible. But on May 16th, as Scorpion began her journey home, she received new orders. Last-minute orders, the kind that don't appear in official logs. She was diverted. Told to shadow a Soviet flotilla near the Canary Islands. A group of Soviet warships, likely accompanied by submarines, operating in international waters. It was supposed to be a quick surveillance run. Then home. Scorpion's last confirmed transmission came on May 21st at 2100 hours. A routine position report. Everything normal. Heading home. 15 hours later, she was gone. Now here's where it gets dark. On May 23rd, Radioman Second Class Mike Hannon arrived for his shift at Submarine Force Atlantic headquarters. The place should have been routine, processing standard submarine communications, updates from boats at sea. Instead, he walked into chaos. "I had never seen a captain or an admiral come into that place," Hannon would later recall. "Now we had captains and admirals running around. They suspended saluting protocols. The formalities that usually governed every interaction in the military evaporated because something bigger than protocol was happening." Hannon overheard conversations. Fragments at first, then clearer. Officers openly discussing the fact that they believed Scorpion had been sunk, not missing, not delayed. Sunk. And more chilling, they were discussing how to cover it up. For 72 hours, while families prepared for a homecoming, while children made welcome home signs, while pregnant wives counted down the days, the Navy knew their loved ones were gone. They knew, and they said nothing. Why? Because the truth was classified at the highest levels. Because the SOSUS network that detected the sinking was one of America's most closely guarded secrets. Admitting they had heard Scorpion die would mean revealing a surveillance system that gave the US a critical advantage over Soviet submarines. Because this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a Cold War intelligence nightmare. There's another theory, whispered in classified briefings and intelligence reports, a theory the Navy has never officially confirmed. Some believe Scorpion wasn't just tracking Soviet ships. Some believe she was targeted. That a Soviet submarine, aware of her presence, had fired first. That the Cold War had just turned hot for 3 minutes in the middle of the Atlantic, and both superpowers agreed to bury the truth. After all, 1968 wasn't just the year Scorpion vanished. 3 other submarines went down that same year: Soviet K-129, French Minerve, Israeli INS Dakar. 4 submarines, 4 nations, 6 months. What were the odds? On May 27th, when Scorpion failed to arrive, the Navy finally went public. They declared, "Event submiss, submarine missing." They launched what they called a massive search and rescue operation. Ships crisscrossed the Atlantic. Aircraft dropped sonar buoys. For 8 days, they searched. Except they weren't searching. They were performing theater, because they already knew. The SOSUS data had given them the location within hours of the sinking. Dr. John Craven, an oceanographer and acoustic analyst, had used mathematical triangulation on those initial sounds. He knew where Scorpion lay. More than 10,000 feet down, her hull broken in multiple pieces, scattered across the seafloor. On June 5th, the Navy officially declared Scorpion and her crew lost. 64 widows, 99 children. Some would never know their fathers, but still the Navy maintained the fiction. "We're searching," they said. "We're doing everything we can." It wasn't until October 31st, 1968, 5 months later, that the Navy officially announced they had found Scorpion's wreckage. Found. As if they hadn't known since May 22nd. Deep-sea imaging revealed the horror. The hull torn apart, the sail ripped free. The forward section completely imploded. What remained was a tomb, 10,000 feet below the surface, holding 99 men who died without even sending a distress call. They died so fast, the submarine's emergency systems never activated. So what really happened to USS Scorpion? The official Navy investigation concluded with a masterpiece of bureaucratic ambiguity. The evidence does not establish that the loss of Scorpion was caused by the intent, fault, negligence, or inefficiency of any person. In other words, we don't know, or won't say, but the theories are chilling. Theory 1. The torpedo. The Mark 37 torpedoes Scorpion carried had a fatal design flaw, a thin foil barrier separating volatile chemicals in the battery. Vibrations, which Scorpion had in abundance, could break down that barrier, causing the chemicals to interact violently. Generate heat, catch fire, explode. Weeks after Scorpion's loss, Navy weapons engineer Charles Thorne accidentally started a fire by subjecting a Mark 37 battery to vibrations. He immediately warned the fleet. These torpedoes were potentially lethal. If one of Scorpion's own torpedoes exploded inside the submarine, it would explain the catastrophic flooding, the open hatches, the rapid descent to crush depth. Killed by her own weapon. Theory 2. Soviet attack. In 2010, radio man Mike Hannon broke decades of silence. He stated flatly what he'd overheard in that communications room. Officers believed a Soviet submarine had sunk Scorpion. Ed Offley, an investigative journalist and retired Navy officer, spent years researching Scorpion. His conclusion: the Soviets tracked her, fired on her, and both nations agreed to a cover-up to prevent World War III. After all, just 2 months earlier, Soviet submarine K-129 had mysteriously sunk in the Pacific. Some claimed an American submarine was responsible. Tit for tat. Cold War chess played with human lives. Theory 3. Structural failure. Scorpion was falling apart. She'd been denied the safety overhaul she desperately needed. Her hull was compromised. Maybe she simply couldn't take the pressure anymore. One crew member, Dan Rogers, had actually refused to deploy on her final voyage, believing she was too dangerous. Maybe she just... Today, USS Scorpion remains where she fell, 10,000 feet down in the Atlantic. Her nuclear reactor and 2 nuclear torpedoes still aboard. The Navy monitors the wreck for radiation leakage. None has been detected after more than 50 years. The 99 men who died aboard her are still there, still on patrol. The Navy calls it eternal patrol, a romantic term for a cold reality. And the truth? The real truth about what happened in those final 3 minutes? The Navy says it's a mystery, but mysteries are only unsolved when nobody knows the answer. This wasn't a mystery. This was a secret. For 72 hours, they knew those men were dead, and told no one. For 5 months, they knew where the wreckage lay and pretended to search. For over 50 years, they've maintained that nobody knows what happened. But someone knows. Someone has always known. The files are still classified. The acoustic data from SOSUS remains sealed. The real communications between Scorpion and Command, if they existed, have never been released. 99 men went to sea. 99 men never came home. And somewhere, in a vault buried in layers of classification and Cold War paranoia, the truth sits waiting. Maybe one day those families will get real answers. Maybe one day the Navy will stop protecting secrets and start honoring the dead. Until then, USS Scorpion remains on eternal patrol. And the ocean keeps her secrets. If this story disturbed you, if you believe these families deserve the truth, if you want to see more mysteries like this brought to light, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories like this, more secrets, more truths they don't want you to know, and we're going to find them all.